Hi everyone, I'm Shaylin here with Reedsy. So today we're going to be talking about writing grants. So what grants are and how to apply for them. So a grant is when an organization, the government or otherwise, gives funds to, in this case, a writer to help them create a creative project. Basically, it's a way of getting financial support to write. For many writers, grants are a way of life. They help them stay afloat and make a living between royalty payments or advance payments. And being Canadian, grants are something I'm very familiar with since grants are very prevalent in Canada. I think here we have more grant money available for artists than any other country. So here grants really are something that many writers rely on. And if grants aren't something you're familiar with, then they're definitely worth looking into. So why should you apply for grants? Grants are non-repayable funds, which means that they're basically just giving you funding to write. It's not a loan, you don't have to pay it back, you don't have to pay taxes on it. Keep that in mind. Sometimes grants are given to cover the cost of a project. Say you're making a short film. Short films can have a lot of costs involved, and so you can apply for a grant to help cover those costs. For other people, say you're a novelist and you're writing a novel, grants can help you pay for your living expenses so that you're able to have time to write and complete your project. The first thing you need to do is find grants that you're available for. There are a lot of government grants, so here we have a lot of provincial ones from like our provincial arts councils. Depends where you live and what you're writing, so do some research and find grants that you're eligible for. Not everyone is eligible for all grants based on things like age, where you live, the type of project you're writing. So do some research to find grants that you qualify for and that your project qualifies for. There is one really unfortunate thing that I do want to draw your attention to, and it's that a lot of grants don't really support indie authors. For a lot of grants, you need a certain amount of published work to be eligible for them. Self-published work doesn't count. It needs to be work that's been published through a verified outlet, a publisher, a magazine. This is really unfortunate, but it's just something to be aware of since it might be an obstacle going forward if you've only ever self-published. Hopefully this is something that will change more as the publishing landscape changes more and indie publishing becomes more prevalent, but it is an unfortunate reality at the moment. So now you need to write a grant proposal. The way grants are awarded is that usually the grants are examined by a grant jury, so a group of people who are looking at the grants will then dole out funds to the projects they feel are most deserving. That's why your proposal is so important. Now, not every single grant will require the same things in its proposal. Some will require references or reference letters, some won't, and they'll just ask for different things. It's kind of like when you're submitting to a literary magazine. There are general practices in place that a lot of magazines follow, but they all do it slightly differently, and the important thing is to check and follow the submission guidelines and make sure that your grant proposal has what this specific grant is asking for. So I'm going to cover the common components of a grant proposal, but do keep in mind that this is not a one-size-fits-all, and you do need to check in with the specific grant and provide the materials that they are asking for. So the first common thing that you'll have is an application. This will be a downloadable form that you'll fill out. It'll have your information, it'll have some information about your project, and here you'll probably also need to break down your expenses. When you apply for grants, there is usually a maximum amount of money available. Let's say that this grant has $10,000 available per person, so you can apply for up to $10,000. But it doesn't mean that you can only apply for $10,000. Maybe you're only applying for $5,000. The grant jury will then either award you the maximum amount that you asked for, or they might offer you less. They'll never offer you more. If you ask for $5,000, they're not going to give you $6,000. I took a class essentially on grant writing. When I was talking to my professor about it, who she has a lot of experience doing grants, she was looking at my project expenses and she was like, "Why are you being so stingy?" And I was like, "Well, I don't want them to think that I'm like padding my expense budget." And she was like, "Ask for more money." Obviously, if it looks ridiculous, they're not going to give you that amount. They're never going to give you more money than you asked for, so you might as well ask for the most that you feasibly can. There are people who will advise you to just ask for the max amount. If it's $10,000, just ask for $10,000. So of course, this is where you need to break down your budget. If you're doing something like, say, a short film where there are very specific expenses involved and that's why you need the grant money, then you'll need to break down those costs associated with the project. If the grant is more funding your time to write, it's basically like, I'm going to be taking time off work so I can write, then you need to break down your living costs. So that would be like your rent, your food, your utilities, your internet. Next up is your written statement. This is a really important part of your grant because this is where you introduce your project. It's kind of like a query letter, or a pitch. This statement should be around 1 to 2 pages double-spaced and should include an introduction and a longer, more detailed statement. The longer description is essentially a summary like you would find on your book's jacket. The introduction is kind of like a 2 or 3 sentence log line and just really succinctly introduces what your project is about. In this part of your grant, you also want to talk about why you're the best person to write this, your unique connections to your project, any specific qualifications or life experience you have that qualify you to write this project, really just any connection that you have to the material. You're trying to convince them not only that this project is worth writing, but that you're the one who should be writing. Grant juries are looking to support the arts in their communities, so you also want to talk about why your project is relevant and important. The important thing here is not to force it. Don't force your book to be about whatever specific current event is going on just to appeal to a jury if it's not actually there. Pretty much all the grants that I read from my grant jury, almost all of them found a way to make their project about being the first generation to grow up in the digital age. There was only one where it felt really genuine and where I felt like it was actually a real component of the project. The others, it felt like they were just trying to find a way, again, to make it feel relevant. So don't force anything here. This can be really brief if you don't really have that much to say. For my grant, it was really brief because it was not based on any current events. I kind of just had one really brief statement about why it might be relevant to the current cultural atmosphere, and it was not the most important part of my proposal because it was not the most important part of my project. It might be a longer part of your proposal if it is a more important part of your project. Next is a program of work. This is essentially a project timeline. Grant money is usually allocated for a specific time, so you might be applying for, say, $5,000 for a 6-month period, which means you need to break down that 6-month period and show what you'll be doing month by month. To use the 2 examples I've been using, if you're doing a short film, you'd show what stage your short film will be in each month. When are you going to be casting? When are you going to be shooting? When are you going to be editing? And is it a realistic timeline? For me, I was doing a grant for a novel, so I just broke how much progress I wanted to make in terms of word count. Interestingly enough, I played it very safe and I gave a very low monthly word count. The feedback that I got from one of the grand juries that was analyzing my work was that it was not realistic for me to write that much in that timeline. They said that there was no way that I would be able to write 10,000 words a month, even though I had said in my program of work, based on my previous writing experience, this is how much I usually write a month. Like, I usually write 10,000 words a month. They still thought, based on their own experience as writers, that that was too much and that they didn't think I could write that much. So there's obviously bias that comes into it. Just be realistic, and if you can support it, say this is what I normally do or this is what I have in line. And yeah, just break down the timeline and show what you're going to be doing for each month that you'll be receiving funds. Next up is a CV. If you have a CV, great. Pop in your CV. If you don't yet have a CV, now is time to make a CV. A CV is kind of like a resume, but it's a bit more pared back. It's basically just a list of all of your relevant accomplishments or work experience. So for this, you probably want to include any publication credits, relevant education credits, maybe scholarships, relevant work experience, if you've done any lectures, readings, events, anything that is relevant to your writing career or this project in particular. And finally is the sample of work. Everything else that you've done is not worth that much if you have a really weak sample of work. This sample of work is where you kind of put your money where your mouth is and go, okay, I have this whole plan. You know, I have a timeline, I have a budget, I have convinced you that my project is interesting and told you what it's about and why it's important, and I'm able to write it. If your sample is really weak, the rest doesn't really hold up. They're not going to read a really weak sample of work and go, I should give this person money, even if they thought it was a cool project beforehand. So put a lot of time into your sample of work, make sure it's your best sample of work. Ideally, it's an excerpt from the project, and really just put a lot of time into polishing that, get some people to critique it for you. It's not like when you're querying where an agent will request more. They're not going to request more from you. This is all they're going to get. This is all they're going to read of your work. So make sure it's as clean and strong as possible. I wish you all the luck in applying for grants and getting grants, and if you've never considered grants before, it might be a great idea to look into them. They can be super helpful for a lot of people. Thank you so much for watching. Remember to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss any new videos from us. We've got new writing, editing, and publishing tips every Tuesday and Friday. Until next time.